Hello?
Hey, what's up?
Hey, great acting there.
No problem.
We're talking on the phone.
Well,
we are here with Darla Edin, our makeup artist.
Yep,
on
she's the
Solitude, and she's done a whole bunch of other stuff.
Season 8 winner of FaceOff as well, and she also won an episode of FaceOff this past season. What was that called?
That's right.
FaceOff. Game Face.
Game Face.
Game Face, yeah.
Yeah, I watched it.
I actually didn't watch it live, but Livingston kept sending me texts like, "Oh,
it was
now."
live updates.
It was live updates.
Nice.
So,
Nice.
Like she made it through round 2. I can't believe it. So.
Barely. I barely made it through now.
Yeah. Before we really begin going into questions, though, I was thinking about how we met and how how random it was. Like I posted a
Craigslist
looking for. I mean, it's amazing what you can find on Craigslist. And I think you responded to the ad like a month after I posted it. It wasn't like right away.
Yeah, I mean, because basically I was still living in Vancouver at the time, and I knew I was going to be moving back to Minnesota, and I was a little bit depressed because I didn't think I was going to be able to find any work in Minnesota. And I went on Craigslist just to see if there was anything going on, and I saw your post, and I was like, what? They need a monster. That's actually something I can do. And I didn't even pay attention to when you had posted it, so I'm glad that I wasn't too late.
Yeah,
well, I was worried, too, because I remember I posted that, and then I had like a couple of responses, but nothing really stuck out to me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that was like, you know, I mean, there's good makeup artists, sure, but not like what I was looking for the, you know, the creature effects and everything. And then you sent me your website, I think it was, that you've actually done a lot of, you know, effects
more
the creature effects,
more
prosthetics,
the prosthetic stuff.
Yeah, I don't use Craigslist all that much, but it's good to know that you can find free couches and award-winning makeup artists on there.
Right, that's about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those stories where it's like, really, that's how you did it? But it's like, it worked out. So
sometimes it works out.
Yeah, I remember the first time we talked, I was actually camping on a camping trip, and we just started talking about, I think, the hand in the 30 segment of Solitude, or American Beast.
Yeah, yeah.
But, I mean, well, what are some of the films that made you interested in working in makeup and effects?
You know, it's kind of a funny thing, because when I was younger, I was so into movies of all types, but especially like kind of your big classic makeup movies, like the Star Wars trilogy and
the original
like
Star Wars trilogy.
Yeah, the original Star Wars. I remember when I was like 7, I remember watching those movies like just constantly. And then
were
you know,
were you noticing the effects? Is that what you kind of watching for? Like,
no. So that's
creatures?
The thing, is that I wasn't necessarily paying specific attention to the makeup or the creatures. I was just kind of like so immersed in the world and the story. And then as I got older, same thing. Like I loved movies, and I was always drawn to movies that had, you know, effects and prosthetic makeups and things like that. But I was never looking at the makeup necessarily. I was just like immersed in the film and in like that, you know, whether it's the character or the story or the overall film. But one of the things that I loved always was like the behind the scenes stuff. Like the DVD would come out and it's like, ooh, what kind of behind the scenes extras do they have? And so I would always watch the behind the scenes stuff. And I never like made the connection that I wanted to do that. Like I never consciously understood that that's what I wanted to do. Growing up, like my family was really traditional in like, you know, get good grades, finish high school, go to college, get a job. Like that was the path that was laid out for me. And it wasn't until I was in college and realized how miserable I was because I was studying something I didn't care about that I finally started kind of exploring other options. Like, what do I want to do? Like, what could I do? And I ended up kind of changing paths, and I went to cosmetology school for hair with the desire to eventually work in film, doing like hairstyling for film. But through a series of unpredictable events, I ended up getting more into the makeup side of stuff and started doing some more like, basically while I was in school, I was focused on hair. Once I finished school, people were like, hey, I'm doing a photo shoot. Can you do the hair? Oh, by the way, can you also do makeup? And I'm like, I can wing it. I can figure this out. And the more I did that, the more I realized the makeup was what really intrigued me. And then, true story, right around the same time, the very first season of FaceOff ever came out on TV, and I happened to be flipping through the channels, and I passed this show, and I was like, whoa, what are they doing? And I saw these people making prosthetic characters, and I was like, holy crap, this is awesome. This is what I want to do. And that was kind of the moment where it all came together, where it's like, I could do that. I don't know how to do that. I have no idea what that even is, but that's what I want. And so kind of like my love of movies and my interest in the behind-the-scenes stuff and like all these characters that I had been watching my whole life, all of a sudden it collided into this like, oh my gosh, this is what I want to do. How can I do that? And so I did a bunch of research, and I found a school in Vancouver called Vancouver Film School. They have an amazing makeup program. It's a 1-year course where you're just totally immersed in everything. You learn the most basic, like, beauty stuff first, and then you work all the way up to full prosthetic making and application. And I loved it. I loved every minute of it. It was an amazing education. It was a really intense experience, but like to kind of discover that I could actually do it, I was really, really excited and just kind of never looked back.
No, that's awesome. So it was basically almost FaceOff that really kind of...
Yeah, I mean, kind of like FaceOff. FaceOff actually kind of was sort of the... it was the thing that brought it all together. It was the thing that made me realize that that's a career. Like
you had your love of movies, you were starting to do some makeup
it was
stuff.
like one happy accident after another that you just slowly kind of tumbled
Well, and
into.
like after having spent years of watching behind the scenes stuff, like obviously I knew that makeup was a thing that people do, but I had never, for whatever reason, I had never put it together that that's something I could do.
Yeah.
And so watching a show like Face Off, I was like, whoa, wait a minute. Like, I'm watching them do the process, and even though I don't understand the process, I see that it is a tangible process, and this is something that I can learn how to do. And, you know, realizing that there's a number of schools out there that actually teach that kind of stuff. Like, there's a ton of really, really amazing makeup artists that are self-taught. I just happen to be a person where I do much better when I have a teacher. And so for me, it was really important to find a program that would teach me how to do those things. And that's what I did. And I, you know, when I went to school, like, I took full advantage of every opportunity to ask the teacher a million questions. And, like, I always stayed after, you know, class would end at 5 and I would be there until midnight, like, just working on stuff. Like, I just, you know, I wanted to, like, completely exhaust all of my resources while I was in school to give myself the best opportunity once I graduated.
That's something that I think is good advice for anyone who's going to, whether it's film school or anything. It's like if you just do the classes and like the work there, you're wasting your time. Mm-hmm. Like while you're there, like take advantage of all the resources you have.
Absolutely.
And like especially if you want to make films, you're around other people who's going to do that too. So you know that, I mean, Livingston and I obviously went to Full Sail together, and that's, you know, that's where we met, and that's, you know.
Yeah, it was all great and all. I mean, if anything, I got anything out of Full Sail was meeting Taylor, and we actually went off and made a movie. But making a movie is what you learn. Learning the process and actually doing it is where I got a lot of my education.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So okay, so you went to, was Vancouver Film School, is that what it's called?
Vancouver Film School, yes.
Okay, so then obviously you moved back to Minnesota. We do American Beast, and then you get your opportunity to get on Face Off. So what was that like? How did you get involved with that? How did you get auditioned for that, or what was the process like?
So for me, like, I had a friend who had been on an earlier season of the show, and she was kind of bugging me, like, hey, you should really audition. And then I was like, I don't know, like, I don't know if I'm ready for something like that. And then every time that they start the audition process, they kind of send out, like, you know, they'll talk to people that they know that they've already had on the show and be like, hey, do you know of anyone that might be interested? And so basically my information got passed along, and then someone convinced me to audition, and I was like, I guess I will audition. And I can't speak too much about the process because it is a little bit, you know, they try to keep some things under the radar a little. Yeah, definitely had to sign a number of papers. But basically, like, you know, it's a process. There's a number of steps along the way, and like, it's intimidating. It's a lot of work.
When you were doing that process, did you think, like, I have a good shot of getting on the show? Do you think this is
No, absolutely not. No, I thought it was just a shot in the dark. I was like, hey, what's the worst that could happen?
Yeah, like, might as well try, but you're not
Exactly. The way I approached it was like, the audition experience to me was more about the experience of just putting yourself out there and, like, doing the work. Like, I didn't necessarily expect it to amount to anything. It was just about me, like, saying yes to the opportunity, and, like, doing the work and just kind of seeing what happened. I didn't think that it would necessarily go anywhere because I was pretty fresh out of school. I had only been out of school for, I don't know, maybe a year and a half, and you know, I had been working a lot, but I had been working on a lot of, like, smaller things, like Solitude with you guys, American with you guys, was, like, my first feature. So that gave me a lot of really good experience, and really kind of put me through the ringer on some of the effects stuff. But, like, I still didn't necessarily feel like I had enough experience under my belt to go into something like FaceOff. But again, it was about just saying yes to the opportunity and just about seeing what I could do and what could happen. So then, you know, I did the process and kind of looked at it as, well, again, what's the worst that could happen?
When they actually called you and said you're on the show, like, were you surprised, or how did you feel about that?
I was shocked. I mean, it was kind of one of those moments of, like, really, let's see, I'm trying to figure out how to, like, put it into words. Like, extreme excitement coupled with extreme fear all at the same time.
Okay, yeah, I know
what you mean. I was incredibly excited to be picked for the show, but then immediately was, like, terrified of, like, oh my gosh, I just got picked for the show. Like, it was this, like, very complex feeling of emotion.
Yeah, it's like, oh god, I'm on the FaceOff, and then at the same time,
yeah,
like,
exactly.
Right.
And I think probably the scariest part was that I couldn't talk to anyone about it. I couldn't go to one of my mentors and be like, oh my god, I just got on FaceOff. Like, I need advice. It's like, because I couldn't tell anyone. It was all very, very secret. So
right. It's
just like, you know, you kind of just have to jump in with both feet and go for it. And again, like, I just decided that that's what I would do, and I went into the competition essentially as a learning experience, as an opportunity to surround myself with really talented artists and just try to learn as much as I could from the people around me, while pushing myself harder than I had ever been pushed before, and essentially just see what I could do. You know, something like FaceOff, you're put into an environment where you have all of the supplies you could possibly want, and everything's provided for you. Like, the only real limitation is time. So it's whatever you could possibly imagine and whatever you could possibly do in a specific amount of time. But other than the time limit, the possibilities are endless. So for me, it was really just about, like, seeing what I could do and learning from the people around me to try and come out of the experience a better, like, more well-rounded artist. And again, with no expectation of winning at all. Right. like I didn't even think I would make it to the end. Like, I was like, you know what? Just 1 week at a time. I'm gonna try and stay as long as I can, and you know, learn as much as I can.
You couldn't.
Yeah, exactly.
Could you? You couldn't talk to your family the entire time either while you were there?
No, I couldn't. It was all very, very isolated. Very, like no one really knew where I was. I mean,
She's missing posters out.
What was it like to actually ultimately win the show? Like, I mean, was it just, the farther you go on, was there like that part where you're like, wow, I can actually do this, rather than just kind of feel like it's week by week?
I mean, basically, like, as it, as the competition wore on, like, I definitely gained a little more confidence from week to week. Like, there was I had a couple of really good weeks right off the bat, so that gave me a nice boost of confidence right at the beginning of the competition. But then I definitely had a few weeks where I was not really that excited about what I was doing. Like, I was putting finished makeups up on stage, which is always, I mean, that in itself is difficult in the amount of time that they give you. But I was not really that excited about my work, and I definitely kind of I started to feel a little not necessarily
I hope I survived this week. Or...
Yeah, exactly. Like, I had a couple of weeks where I was like, oh man, if I can just make it through this week, please let me just make it through one more week.
Yeah.
But then I kind of got over that what I'll call the mid-season slump. And I started to kind of gain more confidence and sort of pick up steam as the competition went on, because I started to sort of find my own vision. There were a couple of challenges where I just couldn't see the character that I wanted, and so I was doing makeup that I just wasn't really excited about. So as the competition went on, I started to really see the characters, and I started to be able to start expressing my own vision, and so I got a lot more excited about the characters I was making, and that just gave me more and more confidence, and I just had more fun with it. And so as it, started getting down into the top 6, top 5, top 4, it's oh my gosh, this is crazy. I'm still here. Do I actually have a shot at this? But I honestly, I never really thought I can win. It was always about one more step. And it wasn't until making it to the finale that it was holy crap, there's only 3 of us left. One of the 3 of us are going to win this. And I just put everything I had into it. I had an amazing team of people helping me on that last challenge, and they gave me 100% of what they had, and we just put up, I put up characters that I was really proud of, and kind of at that point I just left it, at that point it's in the judges' hands, and to win was it was so surreal. I didn't believe it. I didn't believe it was real.
Yeah.
There was moments where I had to remind myself that it had actually happened. But yeah, it was an incredible experience, and so I don't know, especially from the judges on FaceOff are artists that I admire. So to have them pick me was also just that in itself is incredible, because being recognized by people that you admire is
right. They like your work, and it's look what you've done.
Yeah,
you like me? Who am I?
I know. It's wait, no, you can't possibly. That's crazy.
Yeah.
How was it to be called back to Face-Off Game Face to go through that process?
Oh man, so yeah, when they told me about Game Face, I was just oh my gosh, am I really going to put myself through this again? But
was it just out of the blue kind of call, It was. I didn't know any, because it was a brand new show, so it hadn't been on TV. With FaceOff, I kind of knew what to expect, because it had been on the air for years, and I had watched every season, so I kind of had an idea of what to expect. With Game Face, it was a brand new thing, and basically they just kind of explained, they're well, yeah, it's going to be just one episode, so it won't, it's not going to take months, it'll only take a couple of days. But, you just kind of show up, and you don't have anything to compare it to, you haven't seen it before. You just kind of have to, wing it and see what happens.
But I decided, you know, like, with it being less of a commitment in terms of, you know, like FaceOff was an entire season, whereas this was just one episode. I was like, you know what? It'll probably be super fun. Like, I should just do it because, again, what's the worst that can happen? And so I went for it, and it turned out to be so much fun. And, like, it was still stressful, but it was so much more, like, I don't know, there was a less stressful vibe about it, I guess. Like, even though the competition itself is still incredibly, like, nerve-wracking and like the time limits are so tight that you're just like, despite all that, it was just fun. Like, it was just so much fun to just get in there and create.
And that took place like over like one day, or was it several days?
Yeah. Just basically one day of competition. They brought us in, and essentially what you see on TV is exactly what we did. Like, it started out with 4 of us, and then after the first challenge, it went down to 3, and then down to 2, and then that last challenge, we just went head to head, and then it was over. And it was crazy. And the really cool thing about that was the episode that I was in. It was specifically for winners of FaceOff. It's kind of the, like, battle of the champions. I don't know what they were calling it, but it's essentially, you know, like, all people who have won their season of FaceOff. So
right.
That was in itself particularly intimidating because, again, I've watched every season of FaceOff.
So you knew who they were.
That I knew them. I knew their work. I knew how good they all were. Like, it was very intimidating. But it was also really fun because we were people who have all had similar experiences with FaceOff, and obviously we've all taken, like, different paths in our lives in terms of how we got into makeup and what was done since FaceOff and things like that. But in terms of our experience with FaceOff specifically, like, there's a lot of, like, camaraderie, and like, I just had a really good time getting to know my my competitors, but also, like, being able to work alongside them because I really respect all of them as artists, and to be able to work next to them was just really, really cool.
Cool. Right. Well, what are this is something we can all kind of answer. What are some films that have the best makeup and practical effects in your opinion?
Well, Star Wars, obviously. No, I mean, like, that's one of those series where, like, it will just always and forever be sort of, like, one of my favorite, just because like, the sheer volume of aliens that are represented, it's so cool. And, like, they're doing a really good job now with all these new ones too, kind of bringing back the original magic of practical effects, which I love.
I have noticed that. I mean, I feel like in, like, the late 90s, early 2000s, you had a weird, like, they used too much CGI for everything. And now they're kind of almost going back to it. Like, they know how to mix practical effects with CGI now to make it look good.
The blend of the two has gotten much, much better, which is good because, like, there was a period of time where it was really concerning how much was being done with CG because, there's the potential that an entire section of the industry could just be eliminated, and that would be awful. But I mean,
if you watch, like, episode 2, like, I don't think it holds up all that well because there's so much CG, and it just
I agree.
It has not aged well. I don't know.
I totally agree.
Even if you compare the original Lord of the Rings trilogy to The Hobbit, I think Lord of the Rings looks better.
Yes.
Because,
and that's one of the things where, like, with The Hobbit, I still think that the makeup in The Hobbit was really, really good. But it was also, like, the makeup team had to do so many, like, on-set adjustments based on the cameras and the lighting and everything. Because, like, with The Hobbit, they were using totally different equipment than they had with The Lord of the Rings. So they were dealing with a lot more, like, there's a lot more troubleshooting from what I understand. They're, like, one of the biggest issues that they had was the prosthetics, like, on all of the dwarves, the prosthetic noses, they weren't reading as, like, lifelike because camera wasn't picking up on the red tones.
Oh,
so they would have to go in. They would have to paint the noses, like, super red in order for it to read on camera. So in real life, and again, I wasn't there, but this is just like stories that I've heard. Yeah. But in real life, I guess it looked crazy because the noses were all like bright red, but then on camera they looked natural. So it's like, you're always kind of fighting against like new technology, or not fighting against it, but learning how to work with it, kind of a thing. So,
I remember like in, I think the Two Towers, when Saruman, when like the Uruk-hai is born and it comes out of that.
Yeah.
Like that still looks so good and creepy to me. But then like a lot of stuff in the Hobbit was like the CGI goblins running around. Yeah. And it's like, it doesn't look like, when they kind of jump around like a little, it's just not quite lifelike or something. I don't know.
I totally agree. I mean, there's something, there's something real, like, another really good sort of like relevant example is the Jurassic Park movies.
I was about to say that.
When you go back and you watch like the original Jurassic Park, it's so intense and impressive because they actually built a full-size T-Rex. And so the actors were looking at a T-Rex when they were pretending to be scared of a T-Rex. So they actually had something to look at and be scared of. Now cut to Jurassic World, which was a super fun movie, and they did do some practical effects, but most of the big dinosaurs were not done practically. So while the actors were doing their best work, they didn't have anything physical to react to.
Right.
So you just lose some of the reality, some of the magic of that. So, yeah.
I think a lot of it, because I think I was watching a documentary on either Jurassic Park or Terminator 2, but a lot of like the early CGI guys, they came from practical effects because it was brand new.
Yeah.
So
I just
kind of transitioned over. Was this Jurassic Park documentary, they talk about that?
Yeah, they talk about, well, actually, I just watched an ILM documentary, and they were talking about 1985, the young Sherlock Holmes, and that was the first CG character on screen. And then it went from that to the Abyss, and then that's like kind of the first time where people can see, like, man, we can actually do something with this technology. And they were going to actually one time do the entire movie in stop motion, Jurassic Park. And then they were actually, and somebody, I can't remember his name, he was the one that headed ILM. He showed Steven Spielberg the Gallimimuses running through the field, but it was just a skeleton. But it showed like you can actually make a fluid movement without actually, but it wasn't to the point where you can do it all close up, and
right.
And that's why they still did practical effects with Stan Winston involved. But
I feel like when you have guys that are doing CGI that came from practical effects, they know how to work with practical effects. Later on, you have people who just do CGI and they might not understand what the practical effect world is like. So I mean, I think it took a while, but I think we're kind of getting to a better point.
Yeah, I agree. I think we have kind of entered a new stage of the game where they have figured out the best way to blend practical and CG to create, more realistic effects, but without cutting corners and without eliminating some of the realism of it.
Yeah, I think one film that I had, my favorite film for like practical effects is still The Thing.
Oh, make you
Oh my God, that movie is. That movie is incredible, and also like I don't know how much you guys know about the guy.
Rob, what was his name? Rob Bottin or
Rob Bottin.
Bottin,
Or I think it's Bottin, but it might be Bottin.
It's Bottin. It's Bottin.
Okay. But what he went through during that process is just absolutely insane to me. I have so much respect for him because he was working. I don't remember the exact numbers, but he was working 20 hours a day, 7 days a week for 6 months. I mean, he did not have any time. He, basically once they finished filming, he ended up in the hospital for a month because he was just so exhausted, physically drained, that he ended up in the hospital. I mean, he put, when I talk about people, putting their hearts and souls into their work, he is the prime example. that. It's
I still think
amazing.
those effects hold up today. Especially the head tearing off and turning into a spider and crawling around. Like, that stuff still looks good today. And then you have like the remake / sequel or whatever, and it's just like it doesn't look as good. Like when they try to do that weird CGI. Although I guess to give that one credit, I guess they did do it practical, and then the studio or some kind of weird interference made them change a lot of stuff or something. I don't know.
Yeah. I don't remember the specifics of it, but yes, I believe that. And
well, they have videos of them doing the makeup effects on YouTube somewhere. I've seen it a couple times.
Okay, cool.
Yep, I have seen those. But that would be one of my top movies for like for some practical effects was The Thing. Maybe I stole yours, Livingston.
You stole mine. Yeah. I mean. Mine is The Thing, the one from the 80s. But, I mean, and just to add on to, what's his name, Rob Bottin. I watched The Thing with John Carpenter, and I guess he worked on The Fog. But he wasn't head makeup until the Thing. That was like his first head of makeup job. Yep. And he basically, and John Carpenter said, do whatever, man. Just go out there and make whatever. And he ended up making things that are still used today that weren't used prior to that movie. So it was it's pretty interesting.
I mean, he was definitely like a pioneer. I also want to say, like, in terms of, you know, when I'm thinking of like best makeup effects, like one of the ones that a lot of people forget about, and one of my favorite ones still, is Amadeus.
Okay,
and the reason it's my favorite is because no one realizes that it's makeup. Because, you know, for people listening, when you think of the movie Amadeus, you have Salieri, who is played by F. Murray Abraham, and in the majority of the movie, he's the young, you know, Salieri character, played by F. Murray Abraham in just natural makeup. But the whole movie is told by Salieri as an old man, and that is F. Murray Abraham in makeup, and it is the most flawless execution of an old age makeup. That to me is like, it was Dick Smith. Dick Smith is like, he was the godfather of makeup. I mean, that was what people referred to him as, and there's good reason for it, because he was a guy who, you know, he made so many advances in the makeup effects world, and he invented products that made our lives so much easier, and he perfected techniques that people still use to this day, and that makeup to me is like the epitome of like, this is amazing, and I'm just like, that, you know, that to me is another one that definitely deserves, like,
when you don't realize how old the actor is.
Exactly. Because I believe that when they made that movie, I believe F. Murray Abraham was like maybe 40. And that makeup turned him into what, like 90? I mean, it's just incredible. And then also, I mean, Dick Smith did a similar thing with, oh man, I'm gonna have to look it up here. It's I
remember as a kid, just while you're looking this up, I remember as a kid thinking, like, that guy is so old when I'm watching Return of the Jedi. He was 38, I think.
Yeah.
Well, that's one thing we talked about earlier. We were talking about visual effects compared to practical makeup, and you know, if done right, I think when you look at, say, Captain America: The Winter Soldier, Peggy Carter laying in bed and Steve Rogers is sitting there talking to her, that's all in computer. That's all like visual effects. That's not makeup at all, other than her hair. And I think they actually pull it off if it's done by, you know, somebody who knows what they're doing. But yeah, it's done well today when it comes to computers. But and I'm trying to remember, there was another movie that had really great.
I still like the makeup in Back to the Future. Yeah, when they're in their 50s and they're all in their 20s.
Of course, they look nothing. They look nothing like that now when you see them.
That's true. Some of them look better.
Yeah,
how they aged them.
I did. The movie is Little Big Man, and it was Dustin Hoffman. Dick Smith did a makeup on Dustin Hoffman to make him look, I think it's supposed to be like 110 or something, and it's another one of those ones where it's just like, it's so good. It's just so good. So, Dick Smith, he's the godfather of makeup for good reason. He is a legend. He is missed, and someone that I definitely have always kind of looked up to.
So if you were able to work on a movie series, though, and maybe this answer will be Star Wars, if you're able to work on like anything they do in the future, whether it's any kind, I guess sci-fi, horror, or whatever, like for makeup and effects, what would be like a series you'd want to work for? Maybe it's something they haven't done in forever, like a classic Frankenstein or whatever.
So I mean, the real answer is like all of them.
Yeah.
Star Wars would obviously be amazing. But I think, if there was a sort of a fresh take on any of the classic Universal monsters. I mean, I know recently they've kind of, they did like I, Frankenstein and things like that. But like, to work on like kind of one of those classical like monster characters, whether it be Frankenstein or the Mummy would be a really cool one. And not like
the Tom Cruise one.
Not like the Tom Cruise Mummy, but I'm talking like, let's go back to, like, let's just make a super creepy, like, mummy. Yeah. Something like that would be really cool. Another kind of, like, franchise that I'll throw out there. One of my first, like, sort of, when I fell in love with horror movies in my teen years, it was Scream. Like, Scream was the movie that, like, pulled me into the horror genre. So even though it's not necessarily heavy with, like, prosthetics in terms of, like, monsters and creatures and things like that, it's full of the blood and the guts and the gore, and, like, that's a franchise that really, like, drew me in as a teenager. So, like, working on something like that would be really cool for me personally.
they were talking about doing a fifth one, but obviously, Wes Craven's passed away, so I don't think it's going to happen now. I know they're doing the TV series, but I've actually never seen the TV series.
It's not as good as the movies.
Yeah. The movies are classic. I even like the fourth one, but the first one obviously is.
The first one will always.
I think the fourth one's better than the third, but the first one is my favorite.
Yeah.
What advice would you give someone just starting out in makeup and effects?
So, I think the biggest piece of advice is to just, like, not give up. Like, it's hard, it's hard work, whether you're self-taught or whether you're in school, like, it requires a ton of effort, and, like, this is, it's a career that involves, like, hands-on work, so, like, you have to be willing to get into it, and you have to be willing to, like, do it day in and day out for hours and hours and hours. And then also, like, once you're out of school or once you've learned the craft, like, then the struggle becomes getting the work. And there again, like, just don't give up, because it's an industry, just the film industry in general. Like, you get a lot of no's, and you get a lot of, like, no response, and you get a lot, so, like, the attrition
I've never experienced that.
What's no?
I would say that the attrition rate in specifically the makeup side of things is pretty high. A lot of people do have a tendency to give up after a number of years when things don't seem to be going their way. And it's about just, like, doing the work and, like, not giving up, and in the times when maybe you're not working, just continuing to improve your craft, even if you're doing it just for the sake of yourself. Like, whether it's sculpting or looking at reference or watching videos or reading books or just watching movies. I mean,
Yeah.
It's all research.
That's one thing I think you mentioned with a podcast with Jeremy is, like, if you want to work in movies, then watch movies. Like, that's half your education right now. That's how you learn a lot of stuff. And the behind the scenes as well. I know too many people who are like, I want to work in movies, but they don't watch anything. It's like, you have to look at that as part of, I'll watch movies and take notes sometimes, just like, oh, I like this musical scene, or I'll rewatch scenes or whatever, depending on.
Well, and, like, for me, let's see, I'm trying to think of so I went and saw Thor Ragnarok, and, like, I knew I was getting into, like, a superhero movie, and, like, that the Hulk is going to show up, but of course that's primarily CG, and like I wasn't necessarily like going into Thor Ragnarok expecting to be like blown away specifically by makeup. But Hela, the bad guy, the lady, Thor's sister, like the makeup that they did on her was absolutely exquisite, and like that just goes to show, like, I mean, it doesn't have to be prosthetic makeup for it to be incredible. Like, they just did this like amazing beauty makeup on her, but it was so specific and worked so well with her character. So like, I remember just being like blown away by her makeup, and so then like it's things like that that really like kind of draw you in and pull you in, and then it just like helps build this character, this persona that you're following throughout the film. And like one of the things that I particularly liked with her is that throughout the movie she kind of had three distinct looks. There was like her battle look, her her like I'm the queen look, and then there was her kind of like rough, like when she just showed up and was kind of like meh. And each of those looks, I know that's a very technical term, but each of those looks had a very distinct makeup, and so to see the makeup change with the outfit and with the mood of the character, like, I don't know, is that, like, to me that's one of you know, recently a time when I was like, holy crap, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And it wasn't prosthetics, it was just an amazingly executed beauty makeup.
I think before we wrap it up here, I want to mention one film that I just thought of, because you were talking about like her transition. A movie that I think, you know, we should probably mention since makeup is The Fly with Jeff Goldblum.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
The way the make, you know, that, like, I don't know how many steps there were in that, like 6, 8 different looks as he evolved.
So many.
And I mean that'd be hard to do, especially for continuity. You know, because I don't know what order they shot the film. It's like, all right, I know it's got to be this part. You know, he's this messed up now, or whatever.
Well, and yeah, continuity is definitely one of the hardest things for makeup. Whether you're talking about straight makeup, beauty makeup, or special effects makeup, like you have to have such a specific knowledge of your script and of your character and of your schedule. But yeah, you're totally right. Like, there's so many stages of the transformation. Yeah, really, really cool.
All right, well, I really appreciate you coming on to our podcast, giving us this interview. Hopefully this was helpful to some people who want to do what you do, and obviously, you know, they see your success, and they can see your work, obviously, in American Beast. You can buy that on DVD now. And I know we're gonna see more of you in the future. There's gonna be a lot more coming as well, and we'll definitely have to have you back on the podcast, talking about future projects someday.
Well, thanks for having me, and it was I mean, I love talking about movies, so this is great.
Oh yeah, and I think that's the fun part of the podcast is this. We're just really just talking about movies. You know, we can go from Lord of the Rings to The Fly to whatever.
Sit there and talk
to Amadeus.
Amadeus, which was really out of left field because I never hear about that movie hardly, and it doesn't get
I wasn't expecting to talk about that today, but I think that's half the fun of talking with people who actually like watching movies. So if you're listening to this podcast and you haven't seen the movies we mentioned,
check them out.
Definitely do that because they're awesome. And we'll definitely see you next week with our next podcast. So thanks for listening.
Adios.
All right. Thanks for having me, guys.
No problem.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.